You see, people nowadays don't understand horses. They treat horses like kittens, but the problem is horses are not kittens. A horse is a dangerous thing in the wrong hands. I mean, a horse, you don't have to be cruel to a horse, but that has to respect you. And if that don't respect you, you're in trouble. I mean, I went to a woman one day to shoe this horse, and her husband said to me, he said, I've never seen that horse's, that was a black mare, he said, I've never ever seen her back feet off the floor yet. So anyhow, I went to pick her back feet up, I couldn't do nothing with it, so I said, right, I said, I shall have to twitch it. So this woman said to me, she said, oh, she said, I'd rather you didn't twitch it. I said, well, that's either that or you don't get it done. I said, because, you know, that's got no respect for me, and that's got every respect. You know, I'm the one whose head's underneath there. So anyhow, I put this twitch on, and she said to me, she said, well, if I ask you to take it off, will you take it off? And I said, yeah. So anyhow, we didn't take it off. But this woman, I mean, she hadn't got a clue. She treat them horses like you'd treat a kitten. But I mean, kittens don't kick, do they? Horses do. I mean, one of my young customers, about 2 years ago, she was moving horses one Sunday morning, and she had a horse which I'd been trimming it ever since it was a foal, but he was a bit lively, and he was about 4-year-old, I think, and I'd done him ever since he was a foal. Anyhow, she was moving him one Sunday morning with another chap, because she'd got this cob and this other big, he was like a big heavy hunter. Well, anyhow, she slipped over, and as she was getting up, this bloody thing cow kicked her in the side of the head and killed her, caved her skull in. And I mean, that was done as quick as that. Yet, I mean, she thought the world of that horse, but she just slipped down and ended up on the end of the lead. I mean, in hindsight, she should have let the horse go, but she didn't. She finished up on the back end of it. As she was getting up off the floor, that cow kicked in the side of the head and killed her stone dead. Well, you know, you don't, I mean, you can ask Roger Clark, I mean, Roger will tell you the same, that a horse, you have to be boss of them. They have to fear, really, you know what I mean. I went to a horse one day which had been hand reared. That was foster foal. Well, a foster foal, or a horse that's been brought up by hand, fostered, you know, just been hand reared, they are the most dangerous things you could ever imagine, because they got no respect for you at all. I mean, you see foals kicking at the mares, their own mothers, you'll see them kicking, and the old mares will put them in the place. But you get a hand reared foal, he's got no fear for you. And I went in to trim this one day, and when I went to the gate to get him, he was trying to get me with his teeth and his front feet. He cow kicked me in the side. When I reprimanded him, the people who owned him didn't like it. I never see that horse no more till he was 3-year-old. A woman where I used to go, she had him to break. She said to me one day, she said, I've got a grey horse here. She said, he's come to be broke in. She said, I told him I wanted him shod before he come. She said, they got shoes on the front and none on the back. She said, I don't think he's ever had shoes on I don't think he's ever had his back feet picked up, she said, because I can't pick his feet up. I said, well, if that's the horse I think it is, he's had his feet up once because I've picked him up. I said, but he's a bit of a rum thing. She said, yeah, I know he is. Well, I went up to that stable door, and he come at me with his ears back and his mouth open. So I politely got my fist and I hit him aside the snout. And she said, these people what owned him, when he used to do that to them, they used to tip bit him, and he thought that was the right thing to do. But he had about 4 punches to the side of the snake before he realised he wasn't going to get a tip bit. And I said to her, "Go and put some back shoes on him now." And she said, "No, let me have him another week," she said, "and then we'll have a go at him." And he never ever forgot that punch to the snake, because he never given me any trouble. But they will. Hand-reared foals are very dangerous, because they're like anything which is hand-reared. I mean, when my son was at school, they all had a chicken, and they brought this chicken home. My wife would tell you the same. We had it running around the garden. Every time my wife used to go out there to hang the washing out, this bloody cockerel used to fly out and peck the legs. So she said, "You'll have to do something about that cockerel." So I said, "Right." So I wrung his bloody neck, plucked him, put him on the dinner table. The kids all sit round the table, howling. We're not eating that. They used to call it some name. "Oh, we don't want any of that." I said, "Good, more for me." So we killed him, but he was hand-reared, and he got no fear for you, Midge, had he?
No.
And he was hand-reared, this bloody cockerel. But after he went on the plate, he was alright. He didn't peck anybody anymore. Yeah. But people they don't realise, they don't realise the dangers of horses. There's a chap from Thorney near Peterborough, a bloke named Reg Coward, and he said a true old saying: "Nowadays there's more horses about than there is horsemen," and that is true. I mean, I go to shows, I go to horse shows, and the mind boggles how anybody don't get killed when you see the tricks, some on them play. I don't know how the hell they don't, however half of them get home alive, to be honest, because they got no idea. You think, God, whatever they doing. But that is the generation. You see, you see people at a show, they go and buy themselves a heavy horse, they buy themselves a cart, and off they go to the show, and they ain't got a bloody clue what they're doing, half of them. I mean, I do a bit of shoeing for a chap at Wardy Hill, and they got some 3 Shires, and he bought this big grey horse off of Young's Brewery. Not Young's, the Whitbreads. And he said to me one day, he said, "Hey, coming out for a drive with me?" So I said, "Yeah." And he didn't tell me that this bloody thing tries to run away with you. So we put him in the car. I put the reins, he had a Liverpool bit on, because they got 3 adjustments on them. So I put it in the bottom adjustment, tightened his curb chain right up. He said, "What are you doing that for?" I said, "We might find out eventually." Anyway, we was coming down Wardy Hill, we was coming by the vets, and these dogs flew up the fence. This horse took off. He went halfway across the village green before I could stop him. And Andrew, a bloke named Andrew Jackson, that's whose horse it were, he sat aside of me, he looked as white as a sheet, he kept saying, "Oh, well done, well done, well done." I said, "Andrew, if we hadn't had them reins where we had them, he'd have been gone." He went as white as a sheet, but I was half ready for him, because I knew what he was like, but he didn't, you see. And that's like, I used to show a horse, this horse here, used to belong to Peter Palmer from Soham, and he was called Regent. Well, when Peter first bought him, he bought him off Cess Burton from Haddon as a yearling. We went over there, Peter went over there on the Sunday to get him, and they couldn't do nothing with him. So he said to me on the Sunday night, he said, "Will you come over and give us a hand to get him?" So I went in the box with him, lassoed him, we tied him to a post. Anyway, we got him home. I went over about a week later to trim his feet, because he's never had his feet done. And the oldest son come with me, and I said to him, "Now, you keep outside the yard, hold him through the fence." And I went to pick his front feet up. He went straight through 4 rails on this fence. So I said to him, "Right, we'll have him down the yard." We took him down the yard, we roped him to a post. I put a rope on his front leg, pulled his leg up. He threw himself down on the floor. So we trimmed him lying on the floor. Anyhow, when we started to break him in, I had him out one boxing morning. I had him out and I was long reining him, and that was a real frosty cold morning, and he started to sweat up, and I thought, you bugger you, you're going to do something in a minute. Anyhow, he tried to bolt off. I pulled him backwards, and for about half an hour I used to make him go 5 steps forward, 5 steps back. And from that day he never ever tried to run away with me no more. But we used to show him at the shows. We never ever put him in the vehicle until the show day, and he never ever put a foot wrong. And a bloke said to me one day, because he used to go like a hackney, and we used to take him to shows, and very rarely we ever got beat with him. Anyhow, he got sold, and he went down to Holt. They had him down there. They used to do rides from Holt hotel down at the station, and he ran away with a bloke down there. That was the only time he ever. And that's what I say about horses when they respect you. I mean, that horse had never put a foot wrong with me after I bossed him that first time. But he was a rum horse. But he, you know, a chap said to me one day, because he used to go around the show ring, he'd go around it like a hackney. The bloke said to me one day, he said, I don't know how the hell you dare let him go like that. I said, well, I know that when I say whoa, he'll stop. I've got some more pictures of a horse we used to show. The horse, and we had him supposed to have been professionally broken. The chap who was supposed to have been a professional, because the fellow who owned him, he wouldn't let us do him himself. He said, I'll send him away. But when he come back, he was never broken properly. Anyway, we took him to the East of England show, got in the middle of the ring, and that is, these were all one. There was a chap stood on the embankment, and he took photographs of this horse. He started to play up in the ring, and that was where he started to play up. And that was where he was half rearing, and that was where he went right up in the air. And this fella who took the photographs, he sent some prints to Peter Palmer, and he said, can I enter them photographs in a competition? And he said, yeah, and he got second prize. Well, that's where he's right up in the air. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people at the show said they'd never ever seen a Shire horse go up so high. And if it hadn't been for the rave on the front of the cart, I think he'd have come over backwards in the cart with me, because I was standing in the cart. Jake, his name was, and the woman, because the chap who's on the end of the lead there, I mean, he's dead now, but his wife's still got the horse. He's about 20-year-old now. I think he was about 5 there, so that'd be sort of 15-year coup. That's what I say about, you know, horses being unpredictable. Now, that particular day, I brought him home that night, and I said to Peter, I said, I'll have him out in that field when we get home. And I put him in the cart. We got home from the East of England show about 7 o'clock at night. And I had him in that cart, I think, till nearly 10 o'clock. And you know, you couldn't make him put a foot wrong. We took him to the show at Littleport on the Saturday, and we won first prize with him. And you know, but whatever used to come over him, I don't know, because we went to the Essex show, went in the ring, round the ring, on the way back he started playing up like that. He used to play up like that for no reason. And I think the chap who broke him in said he couldn't get him to go, and he reckoned he used to walk one round in front of him to get him to go. But what I reckon he done, I reckon he put a rope round his neck and put another one on the end of the rope and towed him. That's what used to make him rear like that. And I reckon that's what caused it. But he was never I mean, we broke this horse here, this black horse Regent. We broke him in ourselves, and we never ever had any problems with him. And that is the difference between doing something yourself and letting somebody do something who don't really know what they're doing. And that was a chap who's supposed to have been a professional horse breaker, but he was one of the younger generations who didn't understand. Well, to my knowledge, he didn't understand horses as he should have understood them. I mean, we used to break horses in, you know. I mean, one time on the farm, I mean, we used to have about 30 foals a year, and all of them used to be broke in, and then the old governor would sell all the colts. A lot of them would go to America and go all over. And there used to be a big old barn over the farm, and they used to have what they call a sale day, and they used to have a marquee and everything. That used to be like a big fair. It'd be a whole day thing. They'd have auction, and all the farmers from around the area bring all their horses, what they want to sell, to this yard up here, up the road, and they'd have like a big marquee and everything. That used to be a big sale day, and a lot of our horses end up in America. Yeah, Cole Ambrose, well, where I've worked all my life, they always had Shires, but sometimes they would cross them. One year we had a Suffolk Punch stallion. They crossed them with the Shires to get them a bit lighter, because the old Shires years ago, they used to be so heavy-legged and hairy. They used to get what we used to call grease, and the old things would rub. Because some of the old Shires, we used to give them what we used to call physic balls and grease balls on a Sunday, because if you didn't give them a grease ball and a physic ball on a Sunday, you wouldn't get them out the yard on the Monday morning, because they'd be seized up. So they crossed them. We had a Suffolk Punch stallion one year and crossed them, and then we had a Persian one year and crossed some with a Persian. But the reason they had the Shires, because the road work, we used to do a lot of road work from Stuntney to Ely station, and they used to say that the Shires would stand the road better than the Suffolks and the Persians. The old Suffolks never used to sort of stand the road so well. They'd go off the joints. But I remember one year an old fella brought a Persian round, an old bloke named Hammond, and we had five foals that year, half-bred Persians, and we had four colts and one filly, and they was out on the field up on the hill, what we call the Hall Hill, and they got struck by lightning. The filly was killed, two of the colts were hit, but Jimmy Youngs from Corringham, he bought one which he used to call Boxer, and he showed that, and they reckon they used to say that was the best Persian in the country, but that was a half-bred Shire. But the old governor, he always liked Shires, and when they used to bring the stallion, when we had the stallion from the Wisbech Horse Society, the old governor always made them bring the stallion up to the big house up in the village. They used to stand there in what we used to call the wood yard, and that stallion had to stand there until he decided he'd come out the house and look at it, and if he didn't like it, he wouldn't have it. And one year they brought a stallion there, and that was a bit related to some of our Shire mares, and he said, "You can take that bloody thing away," he said, "because I don't want horses with two heads." And he wouldn't have it. I think that was not brother, but the next one down, sort of half brother sort of thing. And that was when he had the Persian come, when we had the half-bred Persians. But they used to, I mean, they liked the old half-breds, because they weren't quite so hairy and so greasy, but they wouldn't stand the road work so well. You know, they used to go off on the old joints wouldn't stick it. because we used, I mean, I remember the time when there used to be 22 horse and carts going up that Ely road to Ely station. Because when I was a boy at Ely school, we used to hang on the back of the carts and get towed to Ely, towed to Ely if that was windy. But because I went up there one day, I had this young horse called Duke, and I'd only put him on the front of the cart that morning, and I'd got to go to Ely station and get some railway sacks, what we used to put 18 stones of corn in. And I said to my uncle, I've got to go up to Ely station. He said, well, you can't take that horse up there. I said, why? He said, you're right, he's only been on the front of the cart this morning. I said, well, he's got to go sometime, he might as well go now. And the only problem I had was getting him over the river bridge. Because when they used to go over the river, they used to look, because the river bridge was different then than it is now. When they was on top of the bridge, they could see the water underneath, and they wouldn't go over the bridge. And some on them, when we used to go over the subway underneath the railway, we used to go under the subway. Some of them old horses had ducked the heads when they went under there, because some of the old train drivers, when they were steam trains, when you went under there, they'd let you get halfway under that bridge and blow off. That bloody engine would stand on top of that bridge, and they'd blow off steam. You'd go under this end and at the other end full bloody gallop if you weren't careful. They'd there used to be an old bloke named Jim Cox used to be a fireman on the railway. He used to do the bugger purpose. He'd let you get under, and then where the steam trains used to fill up with water, the engine used to stand right on top of the bridge, and old Jim would let you just get going out the other side and he'd blow off steam. And then I remember a few years, I heard my uncles telling me they had a mare, went up to Ely station with delivering apples, putting apples on the station. And anyhow, this mare, he said she was so quiet you could drop a bomb on her and she wouldn't take any notice. Anyhow, this particular day, she runned away, and the goods foreman, the goods yard foreman, he see her coming down the goods yard full gallop. He went, because on Ely station goods yard there used to be a big wide gate, and yeah, he run to shut the gate, and as he got the gate half shut, he was end onto the horse, and the horse hit him on the end of the gate and killed him. And they always reckon that mare was stung with a bee. But anyhow, that killed this chap. Yeah. But that station, I mean, nowadays, because we had a chap used to be work horses named John Fretwell. Well, he was going under the subway one day with 2 horses on a trolley, and when you go under the subway, there's like a footpath, and then you can go up between the railings. The footpath used to go up between the railings. Anyhow, this mare, she took fright at a train on the top, and she went up the towpath, so we had one horse and trolley on the road and the other mare up the towpath. And he got hurt over that, and they had to sort of fetch him home. He got nipped between the fence and the bloody horse, I think. Because that was a dangerous old place up near that, on that thing, because the problem was under the subway there was very little room if anything was coming the other way. Which, I mean, nowadays you can get under there, but there's only just enough room for 2 cars to pass. Well, when you was walking under there with horses, you always walked on the near side, so you was between the horse and the wall. So if anything went wrong, there's nowhere you could get out of the way. They'd just trap you up on the wall. I mean, there used to be marks along the wall where the hubs of the carts used to graze along the wall, where the horses used to come right over and scrape the wall. And then we went up there one day, me and another chap who lived up the village, he was a horseman. We was carting celery, me and him, and we had 2 horses on a cart, and one of my horses, the horse in the cart, he lost a shoe. So the last load, we told the old foreman, and he said, I'll get somebody to meet you in the Quain he drove, and they can take the horse up to the blacksmith's shop. So we swapped the horses over, and I had a half-bred Suffolk mare on the front, and this Shire gelding in the back. So we swapped them over. We put the half-bred Suffolk mare in the cart, because one horse could pull it on the road all right, and I just went with one horse. Well, in the goods yard at Ely, you had like your weighbridge, which was metal. Well, when we got on the weighbridge had rock when you got on it. Well, anyhow, this bloody mare didn't like this weighbridge. She got on the weighbridge and could have started to rock with her. She went to scrap off, well, metal shoes on metal weighbridge. Arse over head she went, broke both bloody shafts off the cart. So we had a cart with no shafts on with a load of celery on the bloody weighbridge. So we was in problems that day. And that was only because the bloody horse what was in the cart had lost a shoe. But I remember taking the horse up the blacksmith shop when I was, I think I was about 14, I reckon. And the bloody thing walked around the blacksmith shop on his own legs, walked around around the wall on his own legs. That was a long while ago. But when I mean I've been with horses all my life, but when I was younger, I used to be frightened to death of them. Because up the farm, my uncle used to work up there, and they used to have thoroughbreds. And that time of day, I was about 12, I suppose. That time of day, I always thought the smaller the horse, the better it was. Anyhow, we had these, because our old governor, old Soham and Ambrose, he always used to breed thoroughbreds because he used to race them. And there were some thoroughbreds in the paddock up the road there. And we had she was a 4-year-old, she jumped the gate and hurt herself, so they sent her home to rest. Well, there was 2 yearlings in the field in this thoroughbred, this 4-year-old. So I said to my uncle, I said, I want to take one of them little ones. He said, you can't take one of them. He said, you take that one. And he said, but wait for me. Anyhow, I couldn't wait for him because off I go with this. I come across the road, went through, we'd go and take him in the back of the yard, put him in the field around the back. Anyhow, off I go on my own with this bloody thing. Well, when I got round the back and I realised it was on his own, that started hauling and buggering about, because that frightened me to death. I started to run with it, running like hell, hauling, and he kept saying, stand still, because I was got all the lead. Well, faster I run, faster the bloody horse run. Well, I kept looking behind me, and the horse was coming. There was me trying to run away from it with the leader in my hand. And bugger, that did frighten me out of that. I was a long while forward, before I sort of got over that. But then I was, like I say, when I was about 14, I suppose, I started taking them at the blacksmith shop. But I used to stand in there and be frightened as hell. And then when I got about 18, I got so I didn't, I used to break them in, and so I reckon that's like my oldest son. I think he's about 6'4", and he weighs about 18 stone, I think. And he got frightened with a chicken when he was 4. He come over the farm with me, and we used to have some old Indian game hens over there. And one of these old hens had got some chicks, and she flew at him one day. And do you know that frightened him from that day to this? If you give him a live chicken, he wouldn't hold it. No, he got frightened when he was young. And that was the same with me with a bloody horse. This is a picture of when we used to bloke spray the taters by horse. This is a dry, we call it a dry bloke sprayer, and it used to be pulled with one horse. And the rope underneath, which we used to call a wanty, was to stop the thing from tipping up. And sometimes when we used to be harvest cart with loading shows, if you had a hang and load and that rope broke, then the shafts would come up, that lift the horse up off the ground onto his back legs. You used to have to climb up the shaft sometimes to cut the chest thong on the hames, so the hames come off the collar to let the horse down again. Or if you didn't, well then you would strangle the horse, because the horse would be hanging up by his neck. This photograph is when we had I think we used that on an open day. We had an open day on the farm, and we bloke sprayed some taters with it. And I think that was the last time that was used. That's not that long ago. But that is the sort of thing we used to use. I mean, we had a lot of this sort of equipment, and then when the horses sort of finished on the farm working, they had a sale and sold a lot. I think this thing ended up in a museum somewhere. I can remember when they packed up the farm with horses, we put about 20 tumble carts in a heap and set fire to them. And a bloke from London come up the road and see us doing it, and nearly had a fit. But some chap from Borough Green, he bought about half a dozen of them, but the rest was burnt because there was one come out of the carpenter's shop which had been virtually renovated, and they stuck it straight on the fire. This photograph here, this one, was when we used to breed. Every year we used to put one or two mares out to the HIS thoroughbred stallion to breed hunters. And this one here, he was bred as a hunter, and also this one here, I think. And then they used to sort of sell them on. But this old book is part of the farm when we used to work them like harvest time, like harvest cart and that. That's a photograph of, there's my brother there pitching and David Clary loading, and that was sort of one of the last harvests we done. And then this one here was the horse yard at Thorney, where the horses are standing in the crew yard. This was my old boss, David Morby, who was Cole Ambrose's great nephew, and his son Anthony Morby, he now farms the land. This is the Stuntney Hall, the boss's house, and this photograph here is the bookcase in the office, and here on the right, is full of Shire horse books, and they date back from the 1800s up till the present day. There's a Shire horse book in there for every year that the Shire Horse Society's been sort of registering horses. And this one here is where the horse has been nosy with somebody in the field with a car who shouldn't be there. And this other one is horses going back to the farm from a day's work when we used to work them. And these are more photographs of the last harvest we done, sort of harvest cart. And they're a gang of foals weaned off the mares, because when we used to use horses for harvest work, we used to have to wean the foals off because they wanted to use the mares for carting. And when some of the mares, after they'd been on a foal all summer, we used to have a bit of problem with them getting them to pull, because they'd be so weak that they ain't got the strength to pull, so you had to load them very lightly to get them to get the strength back. This one here is where there's some on their day's rest in the field up in the village, and that one there is unloading shows onto the stack. This one here is the carpenter's shop. I should think that was probably the cart he was mending what went out on the fire. That was the old carpenter. That was one of the harness places. And I think what that one is. Oh, that was one of the old implement sheds. That one there. There's an old horse-drawn horse rake in there. And there's some more horses in the stand in the yard. And the horse yard, that used to be they used to have an old pump there, but then they converted it into had the tap laid on. But I can remember when they used to pump the water with an old pump for the horses. And that's where the horses looking into the stable yard again. And that is the stable up at the Stuntney Hall, where I remember old Cole Ambrose used to have a horse. He used to ride around the farm, and sometimes when people were horse hoeing, we used to have what they called double horse hoes, where we used to have what they call single horse hoe and double horse hoes, where you had two hoes on one frame, and the old governor, he'd get his horse and he'd get his horse between the two hoes, because they were like steerage hoes and you couldn't steer them because his horse was there. And if you cut any beat up, he'd sort of start hollering because you was cutting the beat up. But the old bugger used to do it on purpose, because he knew if he got his horse between the handles, you couldn't move him. This one here is David Morby inspecting a bridle, and that one is my uncle when he was blacksmith. That one there is the old foreman, old Ted Taylor. He was there all his life. When he was a young man, we had two stallions on the farm, and he used to work them in the winter time. He used to have one in the cart and one on the front. And I said to him one day, how did you used to get on with two stallions? And he said they was all right as long as they didn't smell each other. He said you didn't have to let them, if they smelt each other, then they'd start fighting. And that is one of the horse trees at the farm. And that is my father and uncle thatching a stack up in the village, because they used to stack all the corn and thatch it and then thrash it out with the old type thrashing drum in the winter time. There the horses there on the dinner break. I suppose they're in the harvest time. We used to, in the harvest time, because normally we used to start work at 7 and leave off at 2:30 with horses. You'd sort of just have one break in the morning in the winter time, and then harvest time, and we used to sort of leave off 2:30, go home and have a dinner, and then go back and sort of feed up and that, ready for the night. But in the harvest time, you'd stop from 12 till 1 for dinner, midday meal, and then you'd work till 7:30 at night. So you used to have to give the horses a feed sort of 12 till 1. So that's what they're doing there. You see, they've still got the harness on, but just take the bridles off, just leave the harness on. When we used to play with horses, when we used to set the land out, we used to set it in what we used to call lands, and you'd draw what they called a toppin. You'd put a stick up, and you'd draw to it. You'd sort of open your furrow up, and then you'd turn around and close it up, and then you'd play your what we used to call a land, a section of land. You'd play that out, and then you'd what you call cut your furrow. You'd sort of cut your furrow open, and then you'd fold it back so you wouldn't leave a furrow. And then sometimes we would what you call square plough. We used sometimes sort of start in the middle of the field and finish up on the outsides. And then another time we'd sometimes start on the outside of the field and plough till we got to the middles. All depends, what suited you best really. But we used to do a lot of square ploughing, because they used to say that levelled the land up better. But I mean, you wouldn't be allowed to leave the land like they leave it nowadays. I mean, we got a big old tractor on the farm now and about a 8 furrow plough, and the furrow around the outside that leaves, I mean, you could bloody hide up in it, but I mean, you weren't never allowed to do that. I mean, when we had horses, we always used to go with one or sometimes two horses at length round the outside, and leave a balk sort of about 6 inches wide. But now, I mean, they leave about 6 metres around the outside of the fields now. You know, how sort of times have changed. I mean, the old fellas, when they used to sort of what we used to call play around, you wouldn't have a balk on the dyke brink wide enough to walk on. But now, you know, now they have all these here 6 metre bloody jobs now, don't they? They used to sort of when they started in the middle, they'd step the field from the corners, and then they'd sort of step the corners in, and then they'd sort of put like a top and up and then just keep going round it, and then finish up on the outside, and that used to work. You know, it used to work fairly right. But when we used to do it like outside to inside, I mean, that was quite easy, because you just went down, you know, started on the outside, finished up on the inside. But then when you finished, you then had to play your corners out, because where you used to sort of turn, you know, you sort of come down one dyke, then you got to turn down the next. Well, you always had a bit where you turned on, which didn't get played. So once you got to the middle, you would then play your corners from corner to middle, all your 4 corners to the middle, to finish them off. But mostly, I mean, I remember one day when I first started ploughing, there was a chap worked on the farm named Curly Freckle, and he was an experienced horseman. I was only just started, just sort of left school. I was about 15, 16, and that was my first day ever at plough. So he said to me, he said, because they sent me with him, you see, and we used to have what we used to call American ploughs. They was like wooden beam ploughs. They was the old American plough, more like the old oxen ploughs used to be, and because everybody used to want to grab one of them, because they were like the old horses to pull, you see. Anyhow, he was setting this plough up for me, but they were like the old oxen ploughs, but we had wheels on them. But an old chap named Jim Youngs from down in Corringham in Essex, he never had wheels in his plough. He always ploughed with no wheels. He never had wheels in his. Anyhow, this chap Curly Freckle, he was setting this plough up for me, and his team of horses walked forward, and his line horse put his front feet in the handles of my plough. He said, "Bloody hell, we're in a mess now." and he was a rum old character, he was. I was with him one day. We was tater car, lands out bags of seed taters, and he had a horse called Duke, and I think the other one was Prince. Well, Prince was a lazy old sod, and old Duke, he was sort of doing all the work. So poor old Duke, he was pulling his guts out, and this other Prince, what was in the shafts, he weren't doing bugger all. So I picked the clod up and I threw it at him and hit him, because they bolted down the field. And old Curly said, "We shan't be able to trust them buggers no more today." Of course he did get on to me, because I pelted him so much. But he was a rum character, he were. He had an old horse, and he had a set of bits what used to go in the mouth, and they were like saw blades. And if he had trouble with them, he'd stick them in. And he had a horse called Duke, and if that old horse done anything wrong, he used to say, "Duke, you old bugger, you!" And you know, that old horse would stand and shake his head like that, because he thought he was going to get them bits in his mouth. And he was up Ely Station one day, Curly was, and he had a mare named Jewel, and she was playing about, and he put these bits in her. And some bloke got off Ely Station and see him, and he said, he walked over to him. I mean, Curly didn't care about anybody. I mean, he'd effing blind the boss. And this bloke walked up to him, he said, "Take them bits out of that mare, young man." And you know, he took them out, and he never said a word to this bloke. He knew he was wrong. And we had a chap on here named Bill Cooper. He was a horseman, and he was working near the railway. Well, he had a mare which we used to call a scrap ass, and wanted to do the whole lot. somebody went by on the train, phoned my governor up and said chap was working these horses and he was making this horse, you know, he was, well, he could have said he was hitting his horse. So anyhow, my governor got on to him and he said to my governor, he said, well, what do you think I do? Bloody hit it and then that run to keep up. But this bloke reported him on, gone by on the train, but because this mare was a bit of a scrap ass, you see, and this bloke who went by on the train see her and he thought, you know, he thought Bill was sort of hitting her. And he phoned my governor up and told him, and Bill said to him, he said, well, what do you think? He said, what do you think I do? Hit the bugger and then got a bloody run to keep up. But I had a horse called Jock, a little horse. That one was in that photograph, in that book what I showed you in that cart. And I was up the mill. We had a what we call a grinding mill up near the church in the village. And I was up there one day getting a load of meal for the pigs. And the other side of the church wall was one of these here, like a little old conifer tree sort of thing. And we always used to tie the horses on one of the branches. Well, this little old horse Jock, I'd got him tied on this tree, and then we used to back him up to the door, put a plank in the back of the cart onto this platform where this meal was, walk up the plank, put the meal in the cart, bags of meal. Well, anyhow, I got about half a dozen bags of meal in this cart, and this bloody Jock I had, he was a bit of a rum thing. Anyhow, he bolted off. He uprooted this tree the other side of the churchyard. He uprooted the tree with the lead, and he dragged the tree down the other, because the tree was the other side of the churchyard wall. He dragged that down the wall till the branch broke off. He galloped out of the end of the lane, across the village green. He nearly put his head through the front window of somebody's house. He galloped down the village, because our stable's down the bottom of the village in Stuntney, and he galloped down there. My uncle, who was blacksmith, see him coming. He went to get out on the road to stop him. He had to get out of the way, he'd have run over him. Anyhow, I went down there were bags of meal from one end of the village to the other, and I went down there and got him and took him back. And I said to my uncle, who was blacksmith, I said, how are you going to come and hold him while I load him up? So I got this load of meal on, and I got up on the cart and I went down all the old shitty droves I could find. Got down what we used to call Prigg's Yard, and I got somebody to hold him while I unloaded the meal. Then I got to bring a load of boiling taters back, because I used to boil taters in a big old steamer, and I got to bring a load of boiling taters back up to the pigs up the yard up here. So I took him out of the cart, tied him to the wheel, loaded these taters up, put him back in again, got on the cart, brought him up all those shitty droves I could find, and because he was sweating his guts out the time I got back home with him, my uncle, who was housekeeper, he said, where the bloody hell you been with him in the dyke? I said, no, the bucker runned away, so I'm learning not to. He was a sight. Do you know he was only a 16-hand horse. He was only a small Shire, but do you know he'd go as fast the last round of the day as he would the first. And I remember having him, because we used to grow a lot of celery that time of day, wide row celery, and we used to harrow up between the rows to kill the weeds. And you had two horses. You had one horse up sort of what we call one ridge, and one up the other. But you had a long harrow pole, and you had a horse on each end. You never had no. You just had one swivel tree, and that was all on each end of the pole. You never had no double. So you know, because we always used to have a double horse tree. Well, if one went forward a bit more than the other, everything that was pulling still kept level. But this thing, you wanted two horses to go equally level, and you used to have a rope on these harrows to keep them up the middle. Anyhow, this little old horse called Jock, he wouldn't keep in the middle. So I got the whip line, you know, the single line, whip line we used to call it, and I give him a cut with this whip line, and all day this bloody harrow pole was up there like that, and I was fighting all day, and I thought, God, that was a bad thing to do. And he was like that all day. He never give up all day. And I was fighting them bloody arrows all day, because you'd got to keep them fairly square to keep them up the rows. And God, didn't I have a time on it. And then one day I went harrow beat with a mare what used to kick, and she went from one end of the field to the other, kicking at the bloody chain. I played all the beat up from one end of the field to the other. I had to take her home. Because when we broke her in, when she was young and we broke her in, she used to kick like hell, and we used to stop her kicking, we used to half hitch. We used to get a bit of cord. We used to half hitch it on her top jaw in there, and tie each side of the a bit, you know, where bits were in, the ringles. We used to tie each side, so when she went forward to kick, that used to pull a bearing rein back, and because I'd pull this cord, and at the end of the day, she used to have a groove in her top jaw there. You could nearly lay your finger in it where this cord used to go. But they used to stop her kicking. But anyhow, that day, that day, she was alright in shafts. You could put her in the shafts of the cart and she was perfect. But you put her in chains, you know, where you had trace chains, she bloody kicked like hell in them. And they had a mare at Bradford Farm, and they used to call her the kicker. And she kicked her own foals to death. She only ever bred one foal. She only ever reared one foal, rather. She kicked all the others to death. And they put her in a cart, and she kicked the front out of 3 carts before Docky one morning. And we were saying about Docky. Do you know where the word Docky come from? Well, that come from docking. They used to dock your pay when you had your docky. And that's where that word docky come from. Because when you stop for docky, you don't get paid for your docky time. So they used to dock your money. If you stop for docky, they used to dock your money. And that's where the word docky come from. See now, I mean, you do an 8-hour, you do an 8-hour day, but you actually do 8.5. Because nowadays we have 10:30 till 11 for docky, what we call docky. But you actually start work at 7:30 till 4. Well, if you count that up, that's 8.5 hours in it. But you see, you only get paid for 8 hours because you have a half hour which you don't get paid for. And that's where the word docky come from. They used to dock your money if you stopped. We had an old horsekeeper, what was called Jack Giddens. He come from out. He was an ex-guardsman, and he come from out Chatteris way. And I used to be go to shows and that with him. And I remember one time we went to Doddington County Show, and there was a chap there named Peacock who'd got some pigs, and Turner's lorry driver was going to bring these pigs home with our horses. Well, our old governor, he always used to hire the lorry for the day. So, because they were going to put these pigs in the lorry, we couldn't get the horses in the lorry. So Jack and this lorry driver had a bit of an argument. Anyhow, the upshot was they agreed to the money the lorry driver was going to get for taking the pigs home. We was going to stop at the pub and spend that on the way home. Well, anyhow, we got back to Soham, got back to Bradford rather. Jack was so drunk, I was only about 14 I think then. Yeah, about 14, 15. And Jack was so drunk he couldn't get up the ramp to get the horses out of the lorry. So I had to get the horses out and unplat them. And that was a rare old occasion, that was. We'd been to the show and I think we won first prize, and Jack got drunk in the bargain. When I used to be with my uncle, when he was blacksmith, I used to go and help him. We used to go up in the yards in the springtime to trim the youngsters before we went out to grass. But my uncle, he would never shoe a horse or trim a horse if that could see him. Youngsters that had never been broke in, he'd always have stallion bluffs put on them and twitch them. And old working horses, which was at work, he would always have a working bridle on with blinkers, because his theory was if they could see you, they could kick you. But I always find, I mean, I do a bit of farriery work, and I always find that if they can see you, they are better for it because they know you're there. Where if they can't see you and you touch them, their instinct is to kick. I used to do horses up till this last year. I used to shoe horses for Gordon Bailey at Willingham, Persians, and which I won a couple of prizes for best feet at the shows. But I've since given them up now because I've got a bit of hip trouble. And but I always find with them, if they could see you, they was better. And what? But my uncle wouldn't never agree with that. He would never show them if they could see him. That was his theory, because he used to say if they can see you, they can kick you. And he would never. I mean, nowadays, you pick a horse up, you get hold of his leg and you pick him up, but he would never ever get hold of a horse's hair to pull the legs up. He always had a length of sacking, and he'd wrap that round the fetlock and pull them up with that. He would never get hold of the legs like they do nowadays and pull them up. But why that was his theory, I don't know. But but you see, nowadays horses get handled more than they used to years ago. I mean, youngsters years ago, when we used to go up to the yards to trim them, they would never be handled. I mean, they'd wean them off the mares. They would never have a head collar or a halter on them until they was yearlings. You would catch them. We used to have what we used to call a long colt halter. You'd have a prop made out of a willow rail, and you'd get them in a corner. 3 or 5, you'd pen them in a corner. You would put the halter on with a prop. Probably wrap the lead halter around a post. Stick these bluffs on them and twitch, and they probably wouldn't get haltered no more till they was 2, till they had the feet done again, and then they wouldn't get haltered no more till they come round as 3-year-olds to be broke in. So from the time they was born till the time they was 3, they'd probably only have a halter on their heads twice. And so whether that was his theory, I don't think but when you used to put them bluffs on them, stallion bluffs, and put them in the dark, that was surprising how quiet they'd stand, because they was in the dark and they daren't move. They wouldn't never move because they couldn't see. But this one which hit him on the head that time did move, and because that went up in the air and that was fighting with his front feet, and it got him up against the fence, or he backed up against the fence, and because that couldn't see him and he couldn't get out of the way, that sort of smacked him on top of the head. Where if I could have seen him, that probably wouldn't have done it. But I did bluff a 2-year-old once. I was taking it to the show, and it wouldn't load, and I put stallion bluffs on it, and that went through the side gate of the lorry and took me with it, and I took the bluffs off, and I've never ever put bluffs on a horse since. That went through the side gate of the lorry.